What's going on, guys? In this video, I want to give you my picks for the top 10 players of the decade. I've seen a bunch of different sites making their own lists, and I felt like mine would be a bit different, and I figured I would share it with you guys. So obviously, this is for the years 2010 to 2019, and honestly, I don't even really count like the end of this season, just because it makes it easier when looking at all the stats and stuff, but it didn't really change anything. So starting off at number 10, this is potentially controversial. I have Connor McDavid. Some lists I saw, I didn't even have him in there because they said like he only played 3.5 seasons or whatever. Other lists had him very, very high. I feel like 10 makes sense. Like, you have to have McDavid in there for what he's done in the latter half of the decade. But when I look at the decade as a whole, I don't think he's higher than 10. Obviously, a couple Art Ross trophies, a couple Ted Lindsay's, a Hart trophy. He also won a World Junior Gold in 2015. Speaking of which, let's go Canada. They just won literally yesterday, so pretty pumped for that. Alexis Lafreniere won the tournament MVP. Really hoping he's a future Red Wing. But back to McDavid, like I said, it's pretty obvious why he'd be in the top 10. Now, having said that, I feel like we did this video 10 years from now for the years 2020 to 2030. McDavid would definitely be getting the number 1 spot. Next up here, guys, number 9. This is a player I actually didn't see in a bunch of top 10 lists, even top 15s. I think he's definitely under the radar, but deserves to be recognized, and that's Claude Giroux. If you look through the last 10 years, I think he's like 4th in scoring. A big reason why the Flyers actually made that Stanley Cup final back in 2010 before they lost to the Blackhawks. I think he had almost a point per game. Him, Richards, and Carter were unreal, but a big reason why Philadelphia decided to trade Richards and Carter was because of just how good Giroux was. They thought he was dominant enough he could carry that team, and he showed over the last 10 years he really has done that. Unfortunately, not a lot of playoff success, but he's been one of the most consistent players over the past 10 years, and like I said, I think it deserves to be recognized. A lot of times, you know, it doesn't matter how good you are, you need the team around you to win that Stanley Cup, and I think that's a big case with Claude Giroux, but individually, I think a top 10 player over the past decade. Next up at number 8, guys, we have the only goalie on this list, the King of New York, Henrik Lundqvist. I'm not gonna lie, when I was originally making this list, I knew I wanted to have at least one goalie, and I was kind of leaning towards Carey Price. I thought he'd probably have been the best goalie of the past decade. Then looking at the stats, I saw Fleury had the most wins, but I think playing for a stacked Penguins team definitely helped him do that. And then when you actually looked at like the stats of the goaltenders, over the 10 years, Lundqvist were the best by far. ESPN actually had a really good write-up showing just how dominant he was over those 10 years. A big reason why the Rangers were so competitive during that time. 7 playoff appearances. He actually only won 1 Vezina trophy, but I think he was nominated 3 or 4 times. Obviously, a big reason why they made a Stanley Cup final 2014 before losing to the LA Kings. He had the 2nd best save percentage over the past decade, 3rd in wins, and he was actually the best by far in goals saved above average, which is sort of like a Corsi stat, but regardless, it basically just means he was a very, very good goalie over the past 10 years. Now, ESPN actually had him at number 5, which I felt was a bit too high. I think there's a lot of players that have just kind of been more dominant and been more impactful in the NHL over the past 10 years, but definitely need to be a spot on this list. I think number 8 is a good spot for the King. And moving on to number 7, guys, we have the best defensive forward of the past decade. Obviously, that is Patrice Bergeron. He's won 4 Selke trophies in the past 10 years, as well as the King Clancy Trophy 1 year. Honestly, the Selke could have been named the Bergeron, similar to how the Norris Trophy could have been named the Lidstrom, and I feel like the reason he stopped winning was just because they wanted to give it to somebody new. Otherwise, every year I feel like he definitely had a chance at that trophy. He was just so dominant as a two-way center. Also, too, obviously, the Boston Bruins won a Stanley Cup back in 2011, and he helped them reach 2 more Stanley Cup finals. So Bergeron, in my opinion, without a doubt, the best two-way center in the NHL the past decade. Still probably is the best two-way center in the game, and that's definitely deserving of the number 7 spot on this list. And next year, guys, at number 6, we have Steven Stamkos. I think a lot of people are going to say I have him too high on this list, but he's actually number 2 in scoring in the past decade, behind only Alex Ovechkin, who will probably go down as the greatest goal scorer of all time in the NHL, so not too bad a company to be in. And if you actually look at it, it's kind of like Ovechkin, Stamkos, and there's a big drop off to the next guy, who I think is Tavares. Also, too, I think he's 4th in scoring or something like that over the past decade as well. So top 5 in scoring, 2nd in goals, won a couple of Rock Richard trophies. Obviously, Tampa Bay's had a lot of success. Not too much playoff success, but a lot of regular season success, and he's a big reason for that. Again, sort of like Giroux, just been a very consistent player over the past 10 years, and was definitely more of a sniper in the first part of the decade than the latter half, where obviously became a bit more of a playmaker, feeding Kucherov, Point, guys like that. But still, in my opinion, number 6 on this list makes a lot of sense. Still playing really well. We'll see whether or not that playoff success comes for him. And moving on to the top 5 now, guys. At number 5, we have, in my opinion, the best defenseman of the decade in Erik Karlsson. Honestly, sort of similar to Bergeron, I feel like Karlsson got robbed of a lot of Norris trophies just because they didn't want to keep giving it to him. He only won 2 in the past decade. Definitely should have won 3 or 4. There was a couple years I felt like he was by far the best defenseman, and they just wanted to give it to a new guy. And they kind of kept that trend up with the Norris. Seems like it's somebody new every single year. But you look at scoring for the past decade, Karlsson's the number 1 defenseman. The only guy close to him was Brent Burns. Karlsson, though, higher points per game. He actually has less games played than Burns. After those two as well, huge drop off to, I think, Yandel at number 3. Karlsson's also just a lot better defensively, I think, than Brent Burns. So honestly, just no one really close to him, I think, in this past decade. Again, probably should have won 3 or 4 Norris trophies. Single-handedly, I think, carried the Ottawa Senators to that Eastern Conference final against the Pittsburgh Penguins, all the way to overtime Game 7. Like, that team was not very good, and Karlsson was just going God mode. Put the team on his back to get them there, and I think he's slowed down a little bit now in San Jose, but starting to pick it back up. So, again, best defenseman by far over the past 10 years, so I feel like he's definitely deserving of the number 5 spot. And next, you guys, number 4, I have Evgeny Malkin. I feel like a bunch of people don't realize just how good this guy is because he's always playing behind Sidney Crosby, but as we kind of seen this year, whenever Crosby goes down, he always steps it up and shows just how good of a player he is. I would say he's borderline generational, like McDavid, Crosby, Ovechkin, all 3 of those guys obviously are, and I would say that Malkin is like just there. Obviously played a huge role in the Penguins back-to-back Stanley Cups, had 28 points in 25 games in 2017, and 18 and 23 in 2016. Also, he had an Art Ross trophy, Hart trophy, and Ted Lindsay trophy in 2011-2012, and he was actually just 1 year shy of having a second Art Ross trophy along with the Conn Smythe in this decade from when the Penguins won the Cup back in 2009. Also, I was looking at it, I think he's like 8th in scoring of this past decade, but points per game, he's actually 3rd behind only McDavid and Crosby, who I'd say are undeniably the 2 best players in hockey right now. So pretty good company to be in. Unfortunately, the reason he is only 8th in scoring is because he has injuries issues and stuff like that, but 3rd in points per game kind of tells you he is right there with those 2 generational players. So again, Malkin number 4 I think makes a lot of sense. And next up, guys, number 3 of Patrick Kane. I feel like this one's pretty obvious. He's actually number 1 in scoring of the past decade if you include this season, but seeing as Crosby got injured, I don't like to include it, make it a bit more fair, in which case he's actually 2nd. He's also 2nd in playoff scoring, again, behind only Crosby. Forgot to show too that actually Malkin's 3rd in playoff scoring, so he always comes up in the playoffs as well. Patrick Kane, though, 3 Stanley Cups in this decade. It's pretty insane how good that Chicago dynasty was. Won a Conn Smythe in one of those playoff runs. Also, he won an Art Ross trophy, Hart trophy, and Ted Lindsay back in 2015, 2016. I mean, the dude's an absolute stud. 3 Stanley Cups, the points, all the trophies. There's a reason why he's one of the best players in the game. So, number 3, I think it's a perfect spot for him. And next up, guys, number 2, we've already mentioned him, Alex Ovechkin. 1st in scoring of this past decade, and it's not even close. 3rd in total points. He's won 6 Maurice Richard trophies in this decade, 8 in his career. He's also got a Conn Smythe trophy from the 2018 Stanley Cup playoffs. He also has a Ted Lindsay and a Hart trophy. As I mentioned, he's going to go down as the greatest goal scorer of all time, and he's done a lot of that work in this past decade. Again, 6 Rocket Richard trophies is pretty unbelievable. The dude's just a scoring machine, and I personally think like goals is a bit more valuable than assists, and Ovechkin just being the greatest goal scorer of all time. Like, I don't know what else I need to say. The dude can shoot the puck, and he finally got his Stanley Cup this decade as well, which is like the big thing with Ovechkin. Will he ever be able to win one? The fact he did, I think, definitely cements his spot as number 2. And moving on to the number 1 spot, I think it's pretty obvious who it's going to be. Sidney Crosby. 1st in total points this past decade, if you don't count this season. 1st in playoff points this past decade. 2 Stanley Cups. He did it back-to-back. First team to win back-to-back since, I think, Detroit back in 97-98. 1 year away from having 3 cups all in this decade. He also won Olympic gold twice with the golden goal, which is one of the most iconic moments in hockey. Then again, 2014. He also won a World Cup with Canada, which he was the captain of the team for. I think he might have also been the captain for the 2014 gold. I mean, what did Sidney Crosby not do? Like, literally, the dude accomplished everything. And some of his other hardware includes 2 Rocket Richard trophies, the Mark Messier Leadership Award, a couple Ted Lindsays, an Art Ross, a Hart, back-to-back Conn Smythe trophies. The dude's just unreal. I feel like before McDavid, without a doubt, was the best player in the NHL, and until recently, I would say it's about tied, but when you see Crosby on his game, no one else, aside from McDavid, I think, is on his level. So, without a doubt, I think the 2010, we'll call him 2010 to 2019, was Crosby's NHL. He was the face of the NHL. He was the most dominant player, and I don't think you can make an argument for any other player to be number 1 on this spot. So that's it, guys, for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Would love to hear from you in the comments section. I feel like a lot of you guys will have different opinions, even though I'm sure most of the players will be pretty similar. So leave those comments. We'll love to look at them. Also, if you guys haven't subscribed yet, please do that. And as I mentioned, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave that thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.